What's up, Mejabej Lane Haymont here for Talking Chop. I have Emma Cole, who is an editor at Harlequin Romantic Suspense and
That is
MIRA
correct.
Books. And you acquire romance and horror?
So far.
Awesome. So what kind of romance horror are you actually looking for? And this is always good for me too, because I now have it on record that if I need something, I can go back and be like, okay, I know she's after this.
Awesome. So for romance, what I work on right now is called romantic suspense. Definitely more things in the sort of like thriller, cold case, mystery area of the genre. My personal like white whale is to find like a Twin Peaks romance, something that's a little bit weird, quirky kind of characters with a strange backstory. That's like my absolute dream story. But we do publish things that are like, have like spies who have fallen in love and they had to, separate and they come back together for a case. Or I have a book that's coming out very shortly about a writer who's got writer's block, and she follows her hot neighbor across the street and ends up in a human trafficking ring. So I try to do things that are a little bit out of the law enforcement norm that we publish a lot of. But yeah. And then for horror, I am a huge fan of weird fiction. I love everything from like Jenny Kiefer's new book, This Wretched Valley, which I think is fantastic. I love everything that Tenebrous Press publishes. I know, I just got my copy too.
Good.
Yeah, I read a ton of stuff. I like things that are on the strange side of things. But working for a big 5 publisher, like we're part of HarperCollins, and there's a lot of space for, sort of traditional romancy stories in there. So I have to be aware of what's currently trending in the market and kind of work my things into that category.
Okay, interesting. So what is trending in the market? It's always good for me to know.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you actually fit stuff into that. Because I know, every publisher has their own persona. And even though an editor may love something, they can't take it on because it doesn't fit the publisher's mandate.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's a heartbreaking part of the job. Sometimes you really want something and it just doesn't work. But so some of the things that we're noticing that are kind of coming up to the surface a little bit are definitely some sort of darker romance themes are very popular. I personally, we don't subscribe to like very morally gray characters in our series because it's category romance is definitely still the traditional, like has to have a happy ending, which doesn't really match very well with that sort of Colleen Hoover dark romance kind of thing. But we also publish a ton of things where we have really big settings. So stories that take place in like sweeping Yellowstone kind of vistas, where you can have like a suspenseful story that takes place in this really beautiful background, and that sort of helps to move along the emotional part of the story. For sure. We're not publishing paranormal romance at this particular juncture, although it is definitely something that's trending in some of the other spaces. There's a huge market for that kind of thing. It's just not us necessarily. There's a lot of cowboys still in our particular category romance. I think it's not a trend anymore. That's an evergreen thing for sure. We're certainly looking for more books by underrepresented authors and underrepresented communities. So we're like aggressively doing outreach in that area. We really, specifically in romantic suspense, are on the lookout for LGBTQ stories because we have very few. And it's something that a lot of people are looking for and we can't deliver right now. So that's something that we're actively working on for sure.
So I know the difference between, or at least I think I know the difference between intrigue and romantic suspense is that intrigue is more about the romance and romantic suspense is more about the thriller?
No, reverse it.
Oh, okay. That's my problem. So intrigue, the thriller, and romantic suspense is about the romance.
Yes. So it's very much, I mean, there's definitely overlap for sure.
Okay.
But intrigue has a lot more procedural details. Like you want the reader to follow along with the mystery and be able to try and figure it out with you. Whereas romantic suspense, there's certainly mysteries involved, but a lot of times that takes sort of a back seat to these really like heightened emotions and falling in love with these characters.
Okay. So can you acquire in intrigue even though you are romantic suspense?
So right now, what normally happens if we get a submission for romantic suspense that we think is a better fit for intrigue and vice versa, usually we'll ping the editor from the other team and just say, hey, we got this in our inbox. We think it's probably something that might be more suited to you. Do you want to take a look? Because there's definitely overlap, and a lot of times it can be tricky to really like strike that balance. So sometimes if we've got, somebody who sends in an intrigue submission and they it's like not quite there, but it might work better for us, and we have room in our inventory, then we would love to sometimes like work with an author, try and develop that into something that would fit better in the line.
Okay. Because I keep thinking about the Twin Peaks romance and thinking if it could be more Twin Peaks and less romance, or more romance and less Twin Peaks.
I think I would probably have an easier time selling if it is more of a romance. I feel like my managers might be less inclined to pick that book up than I would be. I used to have a really great manager who, like, she's retired. So she was very adamant that I should go out and try and find something that I was passionate about, in addition to what we do. And then I just went and emailed a bunch of agents who repped people that I liked, and a bunch of people got back to me.
Okay.
And then I luckily sit near the editorial director for MIRA when I'm in the office a couple days a week. So I just kind of went over and said, hey, can I talk to you about horror stuff? What are you interested in? Would you let me send you something? And she very graciously said yes. And so that's how it worked. So mostly I just went out and bothered people and said, hey, you don't know me, but do you have anything that maybe we can work together on?
I'm not going to lie. I love that. I think most agents love it, and I think authors love it, because we're always struggling to find editors to submit to, because I think a lot of editors leave the industry. And especially when it comes to horror, it's so few take it on. I mean, it's a lot more than it was, but I mean, I think reaching out is amazing. And it's funny because at the agency, we set goals for ourselves. And one of the goals for a lot of the agents is to reach out to different editors and set up meetings. So we're always having those meetings, trying to reach out, make those connections, and do exactly how we connected when you emailed and said, I'm looking for horror.
I think it's one of those things that it seems tricky to do when we're in the middle of our day-to-day stuff, because we have a ton of work to do and not a whole lot of staffing usually. So, some of that stuff where you can do like networking and outreach, it can fall by the wayside because it's just like one extra thing that, you don't have time for. And especially being, for me, it's super helpful to be remote. And so that I have the access to like people in New York and people in, all over the place. But it's not like the old days of publishing where you'd all just go for lunches all the time or whatever, right? So it can be a little difficult to start to set up those meetings. And I'm new enough in the industry that I am still very enthusiastic, and I make time for stuff like that because I really love it. So, yeah.
What kind of particular themes are you drawn to, or are you one of the type of people, probably like me, that you have no idea exactly what you're looking for until you see it?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, you can have a really great concept, but I feel like a lot of people have really great concepts and ideas, and it has to be something that sort of just hits you when you start reading it, right? Like, I think a
Mm,
lot of times, if you boil down my favorites to just like, this is what the story is about, there's no underlying theme there. It's like a bunch of random things that I just think are cool. And then you have to
mhm,
really have an author that like brings that to life in a way that resonates. Like, it's such a subjective field, and
mhm.
it's hard to kind of quantify exactly what it is that I love about certain stories. Just that I love them.
Okay. So what I get this question a lot, and I always like to ask people because I have no idea what I'm talking about. What do you think? Some people get book deals and some people don't, all things being equal. I mean, do you think it's timing, luck, marketability?
Oh man, there are so many things. I mean, there's definitely an element of luck involved for sure. Like, you have to have your project come to the right person at the right time when that person has the capacity to look at it, right? That's another
Mm,
thing. Sometimes you can send, if you sent me something while I'm in the middle of doing 4 line edits, I maybe have less time to take a look at it than I do when I'm, in between projects or something like that.
mhm,
Um, there's a lot of systemic issues in publishing where things are dismissed as being something that's not relatable or something that maybe isn't a good fit. And um, sometimes that's the case. And sometimes it's editors and agents and sales reps and everybody in the company has to really like sort of examine why we don't think that that's relatable and why we
mhm.
think that is maybe something that wouldn't sell. And because maybe that's just because of our own internal biases that we have not really taken a look at yet. And sometimes you miss out on these really great things because um, you haven't really put enough thought into like opening your mind to that particular story.
That's something, and I'm not saying this is you or anyone in particular because I've received 1,000 agents have received the same response 1,000 times. Um, I can't relate to the character. It's
Right.
not relatable. So how often do you think that's inherent bias? And probably because it's inherent bias, we may not even notice. We all have our blinders.
Yeah,
And
totally.
how often do you think it's bad writing or undeveloped writing?
I mean, there's certainly, I would not want to speak for anybody and say that that's always the case, that they say it's not relatable and there's some underlying, sort of, whether it's malicious or not. That's definitely
Mhm,
not true. I mean, there's so many good editors. There are so many good writers. There is not enough of either of us to publish everything that we want to publish, for sure.
mhm,
But I do think it's really important for editors to read outside of their particular genre that they love, outside of the
mhm,
genre they work in, by authors that are writing different things, by authors
mhm.
who have different experiences than they do, because all of that stuff is super helpful. And it helps you to start to think about things in a different way. Like, you have to curate your own reading so that you can better understand it when something comes to you that maybe is different than what you originally thought you were looking for. Because it's not
Okay.
always going to work out that way, but it's a lot easier to try and look at things as a potential project if
Mhm.
you keep yourself kind of, you have to work at it.
Yeah. So does that mean when a project comes in, and this may be an unfair question, do you look for reasons to acquire it or do you look for reasons to reject it?
So me personally, I mean, I'm sure this is partly like I'm still very thrilled to be working for this company.
Hmm.
I personally am always looking for things to acquire. I don't feel like it makes sense for me on a professional level or on a personal level to want to read something with the hope that I am going to hate it. Like, what am I doing? Right. The whole thing, part of the job that I love so much is reading books. And to me, I like still feeling enthusiastic about whatever it is and hoping to find something amazing, whether it's like in our open submissions or from a blitz or from an agent or whatever. Like, I always want to acquire more stuff. Like, that is literally the best part of the job, is to be able to say, hey, we want to buy your book. Like, I love that so much.
Do you have a quota or a ceiling of books you can acquire? Because, some editors acquire a book a year. Others acquire, 5, 10.
We definitely, I have personally not encountered a quota. We have, because of the way that the category romance business works, we publish 4 books a month. So that's a lot of books.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever told me, please stop. Right? It's like, this might be a good fit. Like, you never know. I'm happy to put it out there. So yeah, I have not encountered that so far.
That's good to know. I've had publishers or editors say, I've been mandated, I can no longer take this kind of book or an anthology. So I know, anthologies can be a hard sell for certain publishers, but have you ever been told directly, no more of this type of book?
I don't think so. Partly, I'm sure that's definitely a possibility that it would happen, depending on how the editorial direction is going. Like, being at my level in the process, I'm not necessarily involved in the grander discussions of like what our direction is going to be in 2026 or whatever, that kind of thing. I'm sure there's also times where you run into the fact that, like, maybe you don't have the budget for whatever book because you have already acquired X number of things. But yeah, I think as long as it's something that's coming in that's fitting our submission guidelines, I certainly don't think that I'd ever be told definitely no to something because it's not if somebody's sending us something that fits our guidelines already, then we give it a fair shot.
A lot of writers seem to think that publishers are the big bad guy and you're out to censor. That's the word I hear a lot, censor.
That makes me feel sad.
I know it does. So do you think I already know the answer, but I'd like you to say it. Do you think it boils down to personal taste over marketability, or is it really just hard numbers?
I think, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's hard numbers. I know that's one of those things that we have heard it's trickier to sell them. It's trickier to get people to buy in. So I get it from that standpoint. I am not a numbers person. I don't, if I'm looking to acquire something, that's like somebody else can figure out how that all works.
Okay. Does sales and marketing actually read the book, or is that what the synopsis is for? Because to be honest, I've been telling everyone that out of left field, and I don't know if it's true or not. That's just my assumption.
I'd have to talk to the individual sales and marketing people. I definitely know that we have a ton of sales and marketing people who read a ton of books. Whether they read every single thing we publish, I think we publish upwards of like 800 titles a year. So I'm sure they're not reading all of those. But I would say definitely, like, when we take titles to like the big sales meetings and say, like, these are the titles we're excited about, people are for sure reading those because they want to be able to sell the books as knowledgeably as possible. So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been misleading people this whole time, telling them sales and marketing will probably never read the book.
I don't read every single thing we publish either. I do my best, but we only have so many hours in the day.
So comps, I'm curious about this. Sometimes I'll comp to movies. And I did that for Parahan. I think
Yeah.
I comped it to Tales from the Dark
You
Side.
did.
Yes. So is that something you can do in-house, or have I been
No.
wasting people's time and just comping to the wrong thing?
I think it's helpful when we're taking a book to the team and saying, like, this is something that we're excited about because it is in the same line as this kind of thing or whatever. But if we're talking about actual comps, it has to be something that's been published in the last couple of years. It has to be the same genre. It has to be the same format. Like, there are a lot of things but it's definitely books that, I mean, as much as I personally am like, oh yes, I know what you're talking about when you say Tales from the Dark Side. Yeah, then we had to come up with a whole bunch of other actual comps when I was putting together the memo for everybody else.
Man, I'm a bad agent. It sounds like. Okay, so how important are comps? Do they go into the P&L? Because we talked about this on a previous episode, and Anne Rose said that the P&L is based off the comps, and I thought and have been told that editors are basically guessing on when they fill out the P&L.
It's I'm not sure is the best way to say it. We typically, for the category romance books, we don't have to do P&Ls because we have so many books that are coming out. We have like a lot of data and our contract is also very different. Our contract is very standard across the board, so there's not a lot of wiggle room for that kind of thing. From my understanding of P&Ls, there's definitely an element of guessing because you're just not 100% sure. The market changes so quickly and publishing changes very slowly. So you're not always in the same spot, definitely. But I think comps are helpful in terms of, especially if they're internal comps, you can look at what our sales team has done previously for books that are similar. And that's probably very helpful for a P&L. But in terms of like the nitty gritty of it, that is not my department.
Okay. So do you personally, or do sales and marketing, other editors prefer internal comps, like books that you've previously published, or literally competitive books from other publishers?
That's a good question. I think we have access to a lot of data for internal stuff. So that's probably easier for us to figure out on our end, unless there's something that's exactly right. But external comps sometimes are tricky. So
that's good to know. Okay. Because, I do a lot of nonfiction, and a Penguin Random House editor, I think it was like the publisher, told me that they want 3 internal comps and 3 external comps. And I was like, oh, so there's actually like a secret sauce that I had no idea that was happening.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be the same for every imprint or every publisher. That's probably something that, that works for them. But yeah, we definitely usually have both internal and external. It's just easier for us to look at actual numbers for internal stuff.
Okay. So how many comps do you think a book needs? Does it need more than 1? Does it need 5?
Oh my gosh, I don't think so, but I think it's probably also very tailored to individual books. Like if you have something that is so, I won't say unique because nothing is like unique, but something that's very easy for people to like grab onto right away and understand where it is that you're going with it. I feel like you don't need as many, because it's also trickier to then find comps that are exactly the same. But certainly having a few options of things that are like kind of like this, that's helpful for sure.
Do you have any final advice for writers, listeners who want to break into the industry?
It's a hard world out there. Don't give up hope. There's always lots of people who, didn't really hit their stride till they were a little bit older, and sometimes that's for the better because you're a little less you're a little more experienced in the world, I suppose. Yeah. I want to read your stuff, probably. So, keep submitting to people. Somebody will love it.
So thank you so much for coming, and people can join us for our bonus episode by subscribing to our Patreon. Otherwise, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and we will see you on the other side.
Thank you.